You know, niggas gotta get their priorities together. Got their mind on the wrong things, spending their money in the wrong way.
Trapaholic, real trap shit.
Say you need that car with the rims and a trunk, just like Jim. It's more to life. Yeah.
I'm telling you. Talk to him.
Say you need that LV bag with the belt and the hat.
That's all you got though.
It's more to life. Yeah.
Talk to him. Real.
Say you wanna turn up at the club, like some bottles, and press them guns. It's more to life.
Fucking everybody.
Yeah.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Saints and Appetizers podcast. And who dat? And we're back. We took a little two-week hiatus since we jumped on the track, been on the Saints track, hopped on that track, and talked about some Saints news. But we are back and having some main course, a lot of main course. A lot has happened over that 2-week period, but I got multiple topics to kind of go over. Some happened several weeks ago, so we'll just kind of gloss over them. But then we'll get into more of a free agency. So it's been a little close to 2 weeks since actual free agency started, which would have been last Wednesday. So in a day, it'll officially be in a week. So a lot's happened. You know, the Saints, they kind of started out slow with how they approached free agency, but they've made a couple splashes and have made maybe more signings than people maybe realized. But anyways, let's get into this. We got some stuff that kind of happened before free agency that I want to get into. Some players that are maybe a little disgruntled after being cut and things like that. You probably can guess who I'm talking about. But anyways, let's get into this. So can I get a menu? And so the first thing I want to talk about is the cut players. You know, some players that kind of controversy over them being cut / released, or if it was just their contract voiding. And the main one I'm talking about is, easily goes down as, maybe one or in the top 3 of best New Orleans Saints wide receivers of all time, because you got Joe Horn, Marcus Colston, and then Michael Thomas is probably right there with them, and then probably if he'd have stayed healthy would have surpassed them. But the Michael Thomas era, it's come to an end. It come to an end, and without a lack of drama. We should have already knew this, and I feel this probably happens with a lot of elite players. When they're elite and they can do no wrong because they're such a good player, but then when reality finally hits them and realizes like, oh, I'm not that elite player. I can be cut. I cannot be a desired player like I was in my peak. Not every player. I'm sure every player feels like that, but not every player has like the I guess I want to say like it's not the reserve, the reserve and the restriction of them to spill their guts and tell everyone how they feel on Twitter and social media. But that's the age we live in now. But mainly it was just Michael Thomas. You got like a wave of emotions from him. You felt during this Twitter rant that went on for like 2 days after he got cut. You saw the high emotions of being happy and saying farewell to the Saints fans, to him literally calling Jeff Duncan, senior beat writer, a hoe. And that was mainly because I guess he didn't like the verbiage that Jeff Duncan used in one of his articles leading up to him being cut, released, or his contract avoiding, which I guess Michael Thomas didn't like that it was saying that he was cut or that he was released, because his contract last year was set up as like just a 1-year deal with multiple void years. So he and if you're getting technical, he really wasn't cut or released, but because he used that terminology, and I guess there's been other controversies and things that Jeff Duncan has released some stories about locker room drama and stuff like that. So Michael Thomas pretty much right out of the gate was like, I didn't get cut. You're a hoe, Jeff Duncan. Quit trying to, like, when I was in my peak, you were always trying to be nice for me and get good stories from me and always wanting to talk to me. But then once things got a little bit rocky in the 2020 season after he got hurt and all that business, he started blasting all of Michael Thomas's personal business, interior, inner workings of how he was with the team. And then obviously before he even was cut, he's saying, oh, he's going to get cut or he's going to get released. That really hurt Michael Thomas' feelings. And I can understand that. Like I said, after being such a great player, uh, a big dose of reality like that I could see where it would upset you and hurt you, but just not everyone else is going to just spill their guts like that on Twitter about it. But like I said, it wasn't all negative, and I take mental health serious. But he was literally like up and down. He was bipolar, just with how it is one just like seething remarks about some of the Saints organizations and the coaches and how all that was ran, and obviously Jeff Duncan, he's a hoe. He's a hoe. Okay, so we understand that. But then after that kind of blew over, it's like, I don't know. It was the last text where I was actually keeping tabs of. It was like 6 in the morning or something, like 5 in the morning, a.m. And he's posting about how it was only special players can really get it lit going in the Superdome, and how that was so special to him, and how the fans could do it, and how he was one of those players that could really get the Superdome live, and how he, thought that was so amazing, so great. So it wasn't all negative, and hell, this is a running joke. You hear it everywhere. Michael Thomas, even with how his career with the New Orleans Saints ended, he still thanked New Orleans before Anthony Davis did. So hey, I don't. You can't hate Michael Thomas. More than anything, I feel bad for him. I feel that such a Hall of Fame potential worthy player, his career basically just completely derailed by injuries and mismanagement of injuries and just internal issues with the team. So that's kind of sad. But so that's Michael Thomas. We went off on. I said I was just going to gloss over some of this, but we really got into it. And so talking about Michael Thomas, and so Dennis Allen is still the head coach, and I think not having a player, such an outspoken player like Michael Thomas on the team, it's good for Dennis Allen. I think that was also kind of the case with C.J. Gardner-Johnson a couple seasons ago. Not having those kind of players to combat any of the rules and kind of ground rules that Dennis Allen lays down, or not following his rules, or listening to him, or doing whatever they want on the field or in training camp or any of that practice. I think not having Michael Thomas helps in that regard. But also, so we're talking about players that were cut or released or their years voided. That was a similar situation with Jameis Winston, who is now a Cleveland Brown. When it first reported that he signed like a $10 million deal to be, I guess, Deshaun Watson's backup. But it came out later that it was just like $5 million. When it first came out as $10 million, it's like, oh, it's obvious that the Saints aren't going to re-sign him for that. But yeah, so Jameis Winston's not on the team anymore, and I think that solely goes to the last play of the game against the Falcons. How Dennis Allen and Pete Carmichael told him to just kneel the ball, and instead they hand off like a sneak running play to Jamal Williams to get him like his only touchdown of the year. But not having someone that will do stuff like that on the team anymore, I think really benefits Dennis Allen, whether you look at that as a positive or a negative. But I want players on this team that follow the rules a little bit and respect the authority of your head coach. When you just have players that are just outright and in the open disrespecting them and disregarding what they want, that's just toxic. That's your, I don't want to call Michael Thomas or Jameis Winston locker room cancer, but that's kind of what they were, because they were building a group, a group that hates Dennis Allen, and then the group that, I don't know about likes him, but at least follows his rule. And you split the locker room when you got players like that in the locker room, on the team, and you don't want that because that just leads to negative outcomes. You want a team that's on the same track and is unioned together. But so a lot of people, I guess, are upset about Jameis Winston. There was always that drama about him maybe needing to start over Carr or the black versus white quarterback, all that nonsense. I think just not having that drama on the team anymore will be good. But at the same time, when you think about it, like with Jameis Winston's production as a Saint last year, he wasn't really any good. Any time they had to call his number, what was that, 3 or 4 games where Derek Carr got knocked out of the game, and then Jameis Winston, and these were all games where it was fairly close. Either they had a small lead or they were down by a score. In none of those games, Jameis Winston couldn't secure the win, couldn't secure the victory in any of those games, couldn't hold the lead against the Packers, even though I admit he got them down in range for a makeable field goal. But still, he didn't go over and beyond or even look close to as good as Derek Carr when he had to come in and his name was called. And that's what you really want from a backup quarterback, that hopefully their name never needs to be called, but at least if they do have to be called 3 or 4 times, at least hopefully they can secure at least one of those wins. And I mean, if he could have secured at least one of those wins last year, the Saints would have made the playoffs. So I don't think losing Jameis Winston as a backup quarterback, other than the spotlight that's brought to him, I don't think they're really losing anything when it comes to production of a backup quarterback, because he never shined as one. He never won any games as a backup quarterback. But kind of like Michael Thomas with the injuries and how it kind of derailed their career. I'll always be upset and always kind of wonder, like, what would they have done in the 2021 season? Last year under Sean Payton, they were 5-2. It's Halloween, and Devin White has to horse collar him and tear his ACL. Like, what if he had played through that whole season? What if they'd have won 10 games and made the playoffs, and then in the offseason, Jameis Winston signs like a multi-year contract, like $100 million contract? Like, well, I always wonder what would happen with that. But really, Jameis Winston, he never was the same after that. But similar story to Michael Thomas, but I think it is a good thing not having those two on the team anymore. All right, so let's see. Moving on. So those are players that kind of counted onto like the cap, how they were making a little room in cap space. I mean, I think they had to eat a lot of dead cap by Michael Thomas not being on the team anymore, and I think they saved a decent amount of money on Jameis Winston not being on the team anymore, because if he would have been on the team, they'd have had to pay him a decent amount of money. So that saved a lot of money. But then, a couple days before free agency, they were still about 10 million over, but then they had like all these restructures. Almost every like main name brand player that you can think of, like, restructured their deal. Like, obviously Derek Carr restructured, Cam Jordan restructured, Ryan Ramczyk restructured, Demario Davis restructured. I think you had some Cesar Ruiz, Eric McCoy restructured. You just had all these guys restructuring, and that got them, I think, down around like over the cap, like under the cap, I guess, under the cap by 13, 15 million. So that's just kind of what the Saints do every year. It's kind of just wash, rinse, and repeat. It looks like they're in such a horrible situation with the cap and are not going to be able to get under the cap. And next thing you know, they got a little wiggle room with what they might be able to do in free agency. But it didn't really pop off like that. The first week or so they were pretty quiet, but even with those restructures, there's a couple players that they didn't restructure. So if they want to make some more room, it's possible. I think they can still make 18 million available, but that would include, you'd have to include restructures from Alvin Kamara, which I think you can make 8 million by restructuring him. Taysom Hill, which would be 6.5 million if you restructured him, and then Juwan Johnson is 3.6 million if restructured. So there's 18 million that could be made if the Saints are wanting to really make a move or sign someone else. They've already made a little bit of a splash, so I think they might be done in regards to signing any player that's going to make over like $8 million or anything like that. I don't see it, but they have the room. I don't really think there's really not that many great players left in free agency that would garner that amount of money anyways. But it's there if they need it. But hopefully they maybe just let it roll over and maybe let those contracts of Kamara and Taysom Hill, and I guess we'll see Juwan Johnson still relatively young. They may, instead of restructuring or adding any kind of extensions to those careers, kind of like Mike Thomas and Jameis Winston, they may just let them expire. So they do, like I said, the wash, rinse, and repeat. They just do this every year, and hell, they could make more if they even wanted to. But so in free agency, we talked about how they didn't really make any moves the first week or so, but they lost some players that I guess kind of maybe upset some people, So let's go over the players that they lost. So Lonnie Johnson Jr., the Saints lost him to the Texans, and he was like a backup safety, reserve safety, special teams safety, and he played safety, but could play nickel or dime as well, and he was a good special teams player. And I think he got hurt like in one of the last games of the season, if I remember correctly. It looked like he maybe hurt his knee or his ankle or something. But he was gracious in his departure from the New Orleans Saints and was quick to be offered a contract. I think he signed maybe on one of the first two tampering days, and I mean he wasn't a huge part of what the Saints were doing last year on defense, or I think he was more of a gunner and a special teams player. But it's always you like to keep players like that are integral parts. Can play both roles. He could play safety, he could play slot, he could play special teams, but obviously, I don't blame him for wanting to go to a young team, young talented C.J. Stroud ran team. So I don't. That doesn't surprise me a whole lot. But I would say that's a bit of a loss. And then not many of these. These are all just kind of like backup and special teams and reserved and players. There's one or two on here that might get people upset. So next one, I think these kind of went in order. You had Zach Bond left for the Eagles, and that I'm talking about how some Saints fans get a little heated about losing some of these players that prior to them leaving they didn't care about or they hated, but then when they leave they talk about, oh well, Zach Bond, the Saints did misused him for the first 3 seasons of his career, and then finally we're kind of trying to figure out, finally figuring out kind of how to use him. They were kind of using him in the same role that Caden Ellis was in last year, and he got like 6 sacks, 6 sacks or something like that before he signed a good deal with the Falcons last offseason. But so yeah, there's a lot of fans out there that were upset about Zach Bond, or even thinking that the risk or whatever, the gamble that they took on Zach Bond. So using terms like that, even though he was like a 3rd or a 4th round pick. So I don't really look at him as a gamble, but it was unfortunate that they didn't use him as a situational pass rusher, like right out of the gate of his career. They were trying to make him an off-ball linebacker, and I guess towards the end of his tenure with the Saints, he collected a couple sacks, but he was actually really impressive on kickoffs as a special teamer. He'd be the first one down there making a tackle. So that's where you lose. You lose a lot there, I think, just in regards to special teams for Lonnie Johnson Jr. and Zach Bond. And then let's see, there's just 2 more here. You got Malcolm Roach, who he did hurt himself. He had a season-ending injury somewhere in the middle to late part of the season, and he was having a pretty good year actually before he went down. But of course, I'm starting to get sick of the Denver Broncos, Sean Payton and the Denver Broncos, more like the Denver Saints, with how many ex-Saints players that they have to sign to their roster. The Saints are almost like a farm team or the Broncos are like a XFL or CFL team. So when players become injured or washed or just aren't good anymore, they go to the Broncos. But yeah, so that's a little annoying. I always kind of liked Malcolm Roach. He always, what I would say that he was an energy and a juice guy, and he always gave you 100% on every play. But injuries are uh, unfortunate and can't control that. Kind of like Michael Thomas and Jameis Winston. It'd be interesting if he would have had a really good year and wouldn't have got hurt, what would happen. But I guess we'll never know about that. And then the main one that maybe is concerning people, but at the same time could uh, disparage some of their concerns about something else. And I'm talking about Isaac Yiadom, uh, who left for the 49ers, and he did good in backup. He had to back up and take a lot of snaps that Marshawn Lattimore would have been having, but he was hurt, had the ankle injury, and just never came back. But Isaac Yiadom, he ended up ending the season with what, a couple interceptions and like double-digit pass deflections. So losing him, that leaves a big hole in your secondary. A proven veteran, but the thing that it opens up is there's been a lot of trade talk about Marshawn Lattimore, but losing Isaac Yiadom, I think that helps solidify a little bit that maybe Marshawn Lattimore won't be traded. And I think seeing recent trades of other cornerbacks will also lead to him not getting traded, because you've seen who is it, Jalen Ramsey and Carlton Davis and L'Jarius Sneed. You've seen these corners that are, I guess you are in the similar and same breath as Marshawn Lattimore. Really, what those players have that Marshawn Lattimore doesn't have for himself right now is that they're healthy. They're healthy. Marshawn Lattimore hadn't played a full season the last 2 years, so that's where I think he gets knocked a little bit. But all those guys, all these starting number one corners leaving teams, have all just been traded for like a third round pick, and I don't think I'm willing to trade Marshawn Lattimore for just a third round pick, even if he's not healthy and even if he doesn't want to play for for uh, Mar- for Dennis Allen. I don't think it's worth. I think he's more valuable on the team, literally just sitting on the bench, than just giving at times a top five corner in the league and a Pro Bowler, a perennial Pro Bowler, away for a third round pick. And he's only what, 27, 28 years old. So that's where it was a little different than Jalen Ramsey being traded for like the third time, because he's almost 30 years old. So that's the only bright spot, the most negative and the brightest spot of any of the players they lost was they lost Isaac Yiadom, but that maybe will benefit Saints and Saints fans and them trying to keep Marshawn Lattimore. All right, let's go on to the Saints finally making some moves. Let's go over these players that they signed here. They signed more than maybe people realize. Not all of them are are blockbuster signs or anything, but they definitely made some moves, and you've heard a lot of fans of other teams talk about how their team hasn't done anything yet and play and in free agency. They haven't done anything. They haven't signed any players, and I was looking at the Saints like that for a little while, but then I had to go back, and even before free agency started, actual free agents, they signed a free agent, a player that had been cut or was on the practice squad of the Chargers. So they were out in front of everyone before free agency even started. I think this was on like March 5th or something. They signed a fullback, Xander Horvath from the Chargers. So they were out in front of everyone, signing these big marquee signings. A fullback from the Chargers you never heard of. But it took a couple. What is it? I think it may have been like the official day, the actual last Wednesday, when they finally signed someone of note. And I'm talking about Willie Gay. And I was surprised to see them sign him this early, and for what they signed him for. They signed, pretty much is in his 4 years with the 4 years with the Kansas City Chiefs, he's won 2 Super Bowls. He's started just about every game he's played. He played all 16 games his rookie year, but only started eight of them. But other than that, he's played 57 games and started 47 of them. And and he's a 2-time Super Bowl champion. The fact that the Saints were able to get us basically a starting linebacker for $5 million in the first week of free agency, I didn't understand that, and I always thought maybe I'm getting. I've watched highlights of Willie Gay since they signed him, but I may have been getting him confused with Nick Bolton, the other starting linebacker for the Chiefs. But I always thought that Willie Gay was a beast, a baller, like a stud linebacker. Like I said, when watching Chiefs games, maybe I was getting him and Nick Bolton mixed up. But I mean, to get a player of his potential, the fact is he's still only be 26 years old, so he's young still. He's been healthy, relatively healthy as well. I was just surprised they were able to get him for that price. And the thing that he brings to the table that I think the Saints were hurting at last year, because man, Pete Werner, he was not very good in coverage last year. And then uh, Mario Davis, he's lost a little bit of a step, so he wasn't quite as good uh, in coverage last year either. But that's something that Willie Gay brings to the game. He brings that because he has, in his 4 seasons with the Chiefs, he's had 4 interceptions, and then this is the impressive one. He's had 19 pass deflections. So he's a good, if nothing else, he's a good coverage linebacker. And that was one of the few holes that the Saints had last year on their defense, was covering tight ends and covering like the middle of the field. But just going off of his last season with them, I guess it was more of the tackle numbers. I guess he had the second highest tackles numbers of his career, but just going off of his last 2 seasons, he played 13 games in 2020, had 1 sack return or 1 interception return for 47 yards and a touchdown. And then he had 8 pass deflections, a fumble recovery, 2.5 sacks. So it shows he's got a little bit of pass rush potential too. 88 tackles, 51 solo, 37 assists, and 9 tackles for loss. So he can disruptive in the pass and the run game. And he had 4 quarterback hits. So that was probably just off of numbers. Those were his best numbers in 2022. And then 2023, he played in 16 games with 15 starts, had 1 interception with 24 yards returned. And then he had 4 pass deflections, 1 forced fumble, 3 fumble recoveries. So he's a bit of a ball hawk. He when the ball's out or up in the air, up for grabs, he's around it. And then he had 1 sack, 58 tackles. So his tackle numbers kind of fell off from 2022 to 2023. But so he had just 58 combined, 44 solo, 14 assists, 4 tackles for loss, and 3 quarterback hits. So I just said it multiple times. I just keep repeating myself. I just don't know how they were able to sign him. A healthy young linebacker with still, I think, some growth potential there, especially if he's going to be in the same room, linebacker room as Mario Davis and Pete Werner. So I was, a lot of people thought they were kind of slow to do anything in free agency or weren't going to make any splash signings or anything like that. I thought with how early in the game they were signing him, I thought that was a pretty decent splash. But some Saints fans didn't think much of it, or wasn't a player that they were wanting to sign. But hell, a good indicator that Willie Gay is a good player, like I perceive and have seen and watched highlight videos, of course. A lot of Chiefs fans seem upset that the Chiefs weren't able to bring him back, and the big reason for that is obviously because of his play and how good he is, but also that they're not understanding why he was only able to get 5-6 million on the open market. But so yeah, I think they started free agency great with the Xander Horvath signing, honestly. But yeah, I like the Willie Gay signing. And so let's move on to some of these other signings, maybe some signings that people weren't quite as fond of. And so the main one that got people stirred up a little bit, rustled some feathers, I guess you could say, was the signing of Nate Peterman, who was originally with the Chicago Bears. So he didn't even start or play last year when the Saints played the Bears, and Justin Fields was out. So that tells you a little bit about Nathan Peterman. He must have been like the third quarterback or practice squad quarterback from the Bears. But a lot of people were upset that the Saints lost Jameis Winston or cut Jameis Winston and got Nathan Peterman, arguably the worst active quarterback in the NFL. Everyone remembers his 5 interception game, but I don't really look at it like that. I don't expect him to ever start or play. I think this was a strategical move by the Saints here. So now they have another backup quarterback in the same quarterback room as Jake Haener, who Jake Haener, if Jake Haener is any good, he should be able to beat Nate Peterman out anyways. And so you don't have any controversy there with your young quarterback that you spent a 3rd-round pick on. Like, he should be able to beat out one of the worst active quarterbacks in the NFL. And on top of that, you won't have any drama, quarterback controversy or drama with Nate Peterman possibly being your backup to Derek Carr, which you had that with Jameis Winston, because people had sample sizes of Jameis Winston and what he could be and that he could play and win games. But I mentioned it already with the black quarterback. There's that kind of drama that just, it's never going to go away. But having a black quarterback behind a white quarterback, you're always going to have that. He's not starting because he's black or that kind of nonsense. And that concept was brought up to me when Jameis Winston went to the Browns. So now I think there would have been a lot of drama and quarterback controversy after Joe Flacco looked so good at the end of the season and got the Browns to the playoffs. So you don't have to. So even the Browns, they don't have to deal with their backup quarterback being white and their starting quarterback being black. So they both quarterbacks are black now in Cleveland. So you just exclude any kind of drama you have to deal with between both questionable sexual conduct issues between Deshaun Watson and Jameis Winston. They kind of fall kind of similar in a similar boat with that. So I mean, it's perfect pairing for Deshaun Watson and Jameis Winston now, and I think that's kind of what the Saints were strategical move was to have. There was a little bit of drama, but quarterback drama between Derek Carr and Jameis Winston last year. But you won't have any of that if Nathan Peterman or Jake Haener is the backup quarterback, unless Jake Haener just lights it up in the preseason. Right. But that was one that people's feathers got ruffled about. But, most of these signings, they're just camp bodies. I'll be surprised if Nathan Peterman actually beats out Jake Haener or is the actual backup. I think they would try to sign someone else besides him if Jake Haener can't secure the job. All right, and just a couple more signings. They signed Cedric Wilson and Stanley Morgan. Cedric Wilson coming over from the Dolphins and Stanley Morgan coming over from the Bengals. So the Saints trying to sign some depth, get some camp bodies, some slot receivers. Cedric Wilson and Stanley Morgan. These are both two guys that the Saints liked during the draft process back when these guys came out. 4 or 3 seasons ago. The Saints liked them in the draft process. So now that they're available, they went ahead and signed them. See where they are now after a couple of years in the league. And I think one or both of these guys, either Cedric Wilson or Stanley Morgan, I think they have a similar. They're familiar with the Clint Kubiak system. I think they played for Shanahan, so they kind of understand that. So that helps. But Saints needed a slot, some possession / kind of slot receiver depth, anyways. after Michael Thomas moved on. But nothing too exciting with those. These are two receivers that never had like more than 40 catches and 400 yards receiving in their career, like their best season, which neither of those had their best season last year. All right, so just a couple more signings here. Like I said, I think a lot of people think the Saints haven't done anything in free agency, but they have. So now this is the big one. This is the big signing that I think for the last week or so, everyone's heard rumbles about whether he's going to sign, and he's scheduled a visit and then he rescheduled it, and people calling him out, saying that is unprofessional. Just ridiculous stuff like that is what I've been hearing about Chase Young. And so finally, he ended up signing yesterday. So that was on Monday, March 18th. The Saints finally secured a high-profile free agent. They made a splash finally, the kind of splash that people were wanting, and they got Chase Young, the Predator. A pass rusher, an edge rusher. Really one of the main things that the Saints defense was missing last year. But after the Saints get him, they got him for $13 million fully guaranteed. So there's a lot more to gain than there is to lose there for the Saints. If he plays bad and just leaves after next year, then you're not on the hook for any dead cap space or having to cut him, and they're still paying him years after he's gone to another team or retired. They don't have to deal with that. It's just a safe, prove it deal. Some people think that's a lot of money, but it's really not when there's defensive tackles and defensive ends that are making up to $13 million. So they're making twice as much as Chase Young is on like multiple year deals. But he fits into the culture of the Saints, coming from Ohio State. He was a high round draft pick, the second overall pick in the 2020 draft. So he's coming to a defensive line that has former first round picks and Cam Jordan, Peyton Turner, and Brian Bresee. So he should fit in well. But just some of the negatives you hear about him kind of surprised me a little bit. So a lot of people say that he's, after the knee injury, they trying to say that he's washed, or his last 9 games in the playoffs with the San Francisco 49ers, that he was didn't seem motivated, or his effort wasn't good. And so that's the main thing I'm hearing about, his effort not being good, him disappearing in games and things like that. But when people mention that and talk about him and try to say that he's a bust and things like that, that's one of the big things that people seem to forget or gloss over. And I'm talking about just his rookie year. His rookie year, he was the defensive rookie of the year. So he definitely has it in him to be a good player. I understand he had a pretty devastating knee injury that kind of knock off your production, and maybe takes a while to come back from, or maybe you don't ever come back from it. But you hear the way you hear some people talk about him, they try to act as if he was like never good, or doesn't have the potential to be good because he was never good. But he was the Associate Press Defensive Rookie of the Year, and was even a Pro Bowler. So I don't get that. And he played in 15 games with 15 starts. He had 4 pass deflections, 4 forced fumbles, 3 fumble recoveries, returned for 57 yards with 1 touchdown, 7.5 sacks, 44 tackles, 32 solo, 12 assists, 10 tackles for loss, 12 quarterback hits, and then just an average value on Pro Football Reference of 14. So I don't see. I mean, if he could get back to that, that's more than what the Saints need from him. Like they get a season like that out of him. Saints defense is in the top 10 already. They get that kind of production out of Chase Young this year. I don't think they're going to be upset about paying him $13 million at all. And I think that will push their defense over from being top 10 to maybe top 5. So you hear people talk about him and talk about Chase Young's in terms as if he was never good, or he can't do it at the pro level. So that's his rookie year. and it says he played in 15 games that year. So I want to say in the last game of the season for him, the 15th game that's when he tore his ACL, had like a really bad knee injury, and then he was just never the same the next two seasons. In 2021, 2022, his production was really down, and he he never he never got back to that. He didn't hardly played. He only in the two seasons he only played in, let's see, 12 games. So that was one of the things. But then just last year, 2023, I think his numbers were similar to what they were before he left his rookie year in Washington. Yeah, so his numbers were similar before he was traded to San Francisco. Like his numbers were similar. He played in 7 games with 6 starts, had a pass deflection, and had the 5 sacks. So he had 5 sacks, 15 tackles, 12 solo, three assists, 6 tackles for loss, 9 quarterback hits. So he was putting up pretty similar numbers that he was in his rookie year. But then this is when he catches the flack. He is traded to the San Francisco 49ers. And I guess he only had one pass deflection, 2.5 sacks. So he had 7.5 sacks, just like he did in his rookie year in 2023. And then had just 10 tackles, 5 solo, 5 assists, 1 tackle for loss, and 6 quarterback hits, and one. And yeah, so I guess his numbers were down, or 49er fans are really outspoken about. I guess they just thought he didn't show a lot of effort or production in the 9 games he played there, but he didn't start any of those games, and just lack of production and effort in his time with them, and then even in the postseason, they were getting on him. Even though I remember him getting making one of the few defensive plays that the 49ers made against the Chiefs in the Super Bowl. He got a sack early in that game, and I don't remember Nick Bosa being wreaking havoc or being dominant in that game against the Chiefs. So I don't know where all the hate from Chase Young comes from, really. And if he can just stay healthy, I think that's just like a lot of Saints defensive ends. Marcus Davenport in the past, Peyton Turner now. Just if he can stay healthy, then I think he can produce like 6 sacks alone. If he can just get 6 sacks, and add kind of a bookend to Carl Granderson or Chase Young, I think this is going to be a good signing. I don't think the Saints will regret it. So that's exciting. A big signing like Chase Young is exciting. It makes you think that the Saints aren't just kind of trying to eat their cap situation and try to have it roll over the next season. Not with a signing like that. And then shortly after, so moving on to the last signing here. So shortly after the Chase Young signing and all the uproar, and most fans seem positive, but you have a lot of fans of other teams, like I said, coming in and trying to say that he's lazy and he's a bust. But most Saints fans seem more happy about it and happy that the Saints finally made a big move. But like I was saying, and like I've been going over, they've made moves. And here's another one: is Oli Udoh. Udoh is a offensive lineman slash offensive lineman slash I guess he's a guard. Let's see, Oli. Oh, if I can find him. Make sure I spelled it. Udoh. There it is. I think this is I think he helps a lot actually in so Oli Udoh coming over from the Vikings, and he's played offensive tackle and guard. I think that helps with just depth and adding another body, but he's actually started some games. I think he was expected to be Minnesota's starting left tackle or right tackle last year, but then he got hurt. Only played 2 games with just like one start before the Minnesota Vikings season really could even get off the ground. He was hurt, but in previous games, he's played 43 games and has had 18 starts. He was actually pretty good for the Minnesota Vikings. I guess this was at guard, right guard, but the Saints may need a guard since they haven't re-signed Andres Pete yet. But he played in 17 games with 16 starts in 2021 and had an average value of 7, which that's pretty good. Actually, I'm kind of confused as to why he wasn't the starter in 2017 or 2022 because he was healthy. He played in all 17 games, but only started 1 game in 2022. But then, from what I've read and seen about him, that they expected him to be a starter or to play more in 2023, but ended up getting hurt, which led to him not being able to. But I think that's a good signing. I think that kind of falls under the Willie Gay. If we're going like in order of splash of signings, it's probably like Chase Young, Willie Gay, and Oli Udoh, and then it's kind of a wash between Cedric Wilson, Stanley Morgan, and then people hating on Nathan Peterman so much, so I guess I'll put Xander Horvath above him. But that's what the Saints have done so far in free agency. It's just about a full weekend, and people before the Chase Young signing, a lot of people were hating on the Saints, saying that they're sitting on their hands, they ain't doing nothing, and you heard, I was hearing a lot of that about the Dallas Cowboys, because all the Dallas Cowboys have done to this point is they released a couple veterans and lost a couple veterans. Lathan Vander Esch retired. Tyron Smith went to the Jets, I think, and only person that they've added in addition to any of their moves was Eric Kendricks, like a 31, 32-year-old linebacker. I think they more signed him just to be a voice or a mic linebacker. So people talking about the Saints not doing anything, I don't definitely, since they signed the Chase Young signing, you definitely can't put them in the same breath as the Cowboys, who stated that they were all in and then haven't done anything in the playoffs. If you're talking about all in, the Saints have at least exuded and showed that they're more all in with this mid-team, honestly mid-team, until they show me a little more or kill the draft, a pretty mid-team to be making really any moves. Like it wouldn't have been that bad of a move to maybe just try to roll over some of this extra cap. But this is what they've done, and hell, like I said, people didn't think it was too exciting, but it's pretty exciting now. The wheels have started turning, and hell, once we get past this, it'll be on to the draft, which that's what some of these signings that they've made open up. The signing of Willie Gay, who has some pass rush potential. Chase Young, who is the main, he's the pass rusher, he's the edge rusher. That opens the first couple picks of the draft. That opens those up for them possibly to be able to take an offensive lineman, offensive tackle, guard, or maybe a tight end or a wide receiver, or defensive tackle. So it opens up the start of the draft. It makes it they have more flexibility and maybe the ability to draft BPA, best player available, if a player of need that falls into their category of where they're drafting is not available, then maybe they can just go BPA, best player available. But anyways, that's what we'll be moving on to next is the draft, and if I'm okay, I would give the Saints maybe a C+ or B+ with what they've done so far in free agency. But if they with what they've done here, and if they can really kill a draft, maybe we can start really talking about the 2024 New Orleans Saints. But anyways, I think that's all I have for you this evening. So who dat? And can I get a check, please?